Recording, and I have turned things over to Pamela. So Pamela, go ahead. And if you're talking, Pamela, we can't hear you. And she might have stepped away for a moment. You know how that goes. Can those of you who are online hear us okay? Maybe I should make sure.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So, Pamela, are you still with us? Let me just send her a little chat.
Oh no, it's that thing again.
Oh no. So yeah,
you
look
Jennifer.
Muted. One sec. Let me try something. I'm going to mute everyone and then unmute everyone and just see. Try again, Pamela. Yeah, you definitely are showing up as unmuted. I mean, muted on our end.
Okay.
Aha! There you are. Now we can. Yes. Now we can listen to you, Pamela. Hear about trails. Go ahead. Uh-oh. How's this really a short conversation?
Can anybody hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Woo! Okay. And folks online can hear me? I hope. Great. Beautiful. Okay. So I will get started. I'm assuming you guys can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, I appreciate this chance to talk about trails. And I should say, I know that we're now a legitimate organization because we have an entry in Wikipedia. So that's all it, you know, we're good. First, I want to get into, you know, why we came into existence, I guess, in the first place. Obvious reasons was achieving, of course, economies of scope and scale. And the major dream was really getting more powerful resources into more hands, to put it simply. And we're also looking to kind of have a more seamless experience for students going through the entire academic process. And it's also a matter of enhancing not just the experience for the students, but also for the staff and faculty at these institutions, because we're now making things accessible to them that can go towards their research and other things in that area. But leveling the playing field kind of goes back to the getting more powerful resources into more hands was really the overall idea. Rising tide raises all boats kind of thing. And I think we're starting to see some of that. Just to back up a little bit and give you a really thumbnail quick history, in the summer and fall of 2016, things finally came together. I won't go into the full history of us, but by September, we had a MOU from every one of the higher education academic libraries in the state. We count that as 24, even though you've got other schools included and under flagships and whatnot. They didn't necessarily have their own library, so by our count, it's 24 institutions. including the UM Law School. And, oh, I'm sorry, I should back up. I wanted to say, even though I'm giving this kind of presentation, that this should be more of like a discussion. So if you guys have questions or whatever, please, as we go through this, let me know. So, and although we had 24 to start with, I have to note that we have lost Montana Bible College. They were not able to continue with their membership, so technically we're at 23. The structure and the governance, just to give you an idea, is a general council that's made up of a representative from each school, and that person is either a director or dean, usually at this point, always, I guess, from each school, and it's one institution, one vote, because obviously we're aware of the big gorillas in the room, and MSU and UM. There had to be a way of making this equal, and I think that was the only way that this was going to work. So that was agreed upon early on. There is a dues membership, and that's based on institutional type, like 2-year, 4-year, et cetera, doctoral, FTE, and the material budget for the library. And that can range from 300 up to like 1,100. Most recently, there is some additional funding going on there. There's actually support for the coordinator position. Now we have requested that. That has been filled into it. That adds an additional fee onto what they're already paying, so that can range from 700 to actually 46,000. So quite a difference. So we have that going on, and then there's a cost allocation, which comes into play when we're looking at purchasing collective e-resources and what have you, and that's also formulas based on institutional FTE and library material budget. So I thought I heard something. Do you have any questions about any of that so far?
People shaking their heads no in the room.
Okay, thanks. So just moving on to continue with what the structure is like. We have 10 committees at this point. I kind of broken them down into 2 groups here. There's the first 5 committees, which I coordinate, and ultimately they report, of course, to the general counsel. And the second group, which is the tech services subcommittee, and that would be John Greer at UM, who coordinates that group. Any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay.
I have a question.
So, sure.
The Overdrive Committee and the Tech Services e-Resources Subcommittee, how do they work together?
Good question. No, I'm kidding. They kind of are set up. Actually, is Hannah still online? Because she could address that. She is the chair for the e-Resources Committee, and Jerusha is the chair for Overdrive. But I don't know if Hannah's on or not. And if she is, can I?
I am.
Okay. Would you like to?
Sure. I guess the way we work together is typically the collection development standing committee, they do like all the purchasing. So whatever they buy, it'll come down to our committee. And we kind of work together to help everybody get set up. So we're recently working on like a checklist for Trails to help with some of our collaborative purchases, just in terms of like authentication and all of that. We meet once a month. There's, I think, 5 of us on it, and I'll usually send out agenda items. I mean, it just varies kind of what we discuss. I don't know. Does that kind of answer it?
I think they were asking about Overdrive in particular. I mean, if you guys, yeah, you did some training for them, correct? I believe so.
We helped.
Right.
I was going to say we helped to get it. MSU was not one of the schools that went in to this most recent Overdrive packages, but we were able to help some of the smaller schools get it all set up within Alma and displaying in their Primo.
So Hannah, basically, am I understanding right that like the purpose of the e-resources committee is really to help the libraries implement the resources purchased by collection development and Overdrive through Alma, and then helping with like students getting access to the resources? Is that kind of the purpose of the e-resources committee?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And I will say they are a godsend. So they've been incredibly helpful in a myriad of ways. I think they're very much appreciated by the members. So.
Can you tell us a little more about fulfillment and resource sharing, what those subcommittees focus on?
Yeah, that's a strange one because sometimes I'm not even sure they should be separate committees. That was kind of debated, but they are as it stands right now. So the resource sharing is more dealing with, I guess, the overview of sending materials back and forth internally. And looking at the ROTAs and just determining if they're working and if members are doing what they say they're doing, kind of thing. And fulfillment is what we traditionally think more of like as circulation. But there's different terminology that Alma uses that we've adapted or adopted. We haven't really adapted, but we've adopted it. So some of their stuff just kind of overlaps with one another, but at this point we're maintaining separate groups. Does that answer your question, or did you want something?
Yeah, no, that's good, thanks.
Okay. That's a bit more specific. So yes, so those are the committees. The newest one is the Open Educational Resources Group, which I will talk a little bit more about in a second. But looking at what unique things Trails offers, I guess first and foremost, the low-hanging fruit for us was leveraging our buying power for e-resources and services. I've got a list up here, but that's sorry, has not been updated actually to include 2019 resources. 2019 we've got AAAS, APA psych articles, Lyrasis, RDA toolkits, and we're right now working on MLA International Bibliography with EBSCO, since they're the only ones that you can get it through now. And there are a multitude of other deals being negotiated or in progress. I'm looking at here. Oh, right, and we have, we're looking at LinkedIn Learning. I don't know how many of the publics or other folks use that. Formerly lynda.com. Their pricing was through the roof, though, as far as we're concerned. So I'm not sure that's going to actually work out. But I'm just curious, is there anybody there? What are your feelings about that? Do you use it?
Pam, just to jump in, I think LinkedIn Learning was just for the academic clients, and then Lynda was staying the same for the public.
Is that how that? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I did not realize they broke it off into two groups like that. Okay. Are a lot of people using Lynda, though?
Too expensive. We had a request, looked at the price and said, no.
Yeah. It's pricey.
I think maybe Bozeman Public, but I don't know if Pam Henley's still online, but she might be able to answer that. But most of the public libraries panelists said the same thing you did, that the pricing was too much. They couldn't afford it.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. It's good to know that that they're unfair across the board. So, I guess next thing I was going to kind of try to discuss was cost avoidance, because that's what we all are talking about as far as ROI. It's very tricky. There are some big numbers here that you're looking at, but that's with a grain of salt, of course, because you know, everything is figured out differently, and you don't necessarily know what kind of deal somebody would have negotiated. So that's why we go with cost avoidance instead of savings. From September 2017 to May 2018, that we did approximately $6 million worth of business, but that may be including some like 3-year contracts as well. It's just like yearly. And we did exclude Elsevier, because if we had kept that in, that would have like put this off the charts. It's just so expensive as to completely give us an inaccurate reading there. But we had to have some numbers, so this is kind of what we're going with. But like I said, I have not updated this because it is so difficult to get a realistic idea of how much our members are actually avoiding in expenditures, and we want to make sure that anybody in the government or legislature knows that, no, this is not money that we now have in another pot. This is just money that we've avoided spending that we didn't have in the first place.
I like that, Pamela.
Yeah.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
I have a question.
So, oh yeah, go ahead.
Hello, this is Kara. I guess this is probably varies from member to member, but did most of the libraries subscribe to these databases before, or did more of them gain that resource through Trails?
That's actually an excellent question. I wish we had more data on that, and I don't think we do. It's definitely a mix, but I mean, as you can imagine, it's going to generally be that the flagships are getting most things or everything, and then some of the smaller schools may in fact be getting something or may not, but then we're trying to bring them on board. So certainly what we do with negotiation, time and time again, even though it doesn't seem to work, is, you know, suggest to the vendor that, well, we've got this deal going already with Bozeman or Missoula, and can you just add on the rest of our members for nothing? I always say nothing, or for nada, and I never see it that way for some surprising reason. But they should, but that's the tack that we take. But there is actually specifically this next resource, which is the Elsevier Science Direct Freedom Collection, which is very, very expensive. And this would be, I believe, for all of those 9 members that are definitely smaller schools in our group. They are accessing something that would not ever in this lifetime be something that they could afford normally on their own. And as you can see, I mean, they're doing it at a significant savings. And that again is kind of our bottom line. So we're talking about getting high quality, high impact resources into the hands of students and faculty around the state, no matter where they live or, you know, what school they're at. So we were happy with this negotiation, even though Elsevier has a very interesting reputation amongst the publishers that are out there. But yeah, so, and something else I wanted to mention is that we do try to include other libraries, when and if possible, at least I used to try a lot more often. It's getting harder in some ways, but I try with Automate. Recall that we had some participation. I worked with Kara, and we had a number of publics around the state doing it, and a number of academics. When the renewal time came up, though, most of the publics dropped, and that we just couldn't get that deal to fly. And in fact, I had a good number of academics that did too. But the point being that we do try to include publics and K-12. I always bring it up, but sometimes it doesn't work out because we're looking at different resources, but considering it on the spectrum, there might be a certain component or resource in the collection that K-12 might want, and we maybe wouldn't use it, but we'd use something else in the collection. So, and I know, this is something that we're very open to, and hopefully we can pursue this at some point. That it has been problematic for K-12, especially since we don't have like an exact point person. At least I haven't been able to successfully discover someone that I could go back and forth to see if we could work any kind of deals on a broader basis. But I just, again, want to state that I think, we should be open to that. So as far as what the process is for determining what resources we get, it's basically quarterly, and it involves a survey of all our members, and then there's a review by the Collection Development Committee, so to kind of hone in and prioritize and figure out what we're going to go after. And then there's an ungodly amount of back and forth with vendors and members after that. Theoretically, we don't negotiate a deal unless we have at least 4 interested members, but that doesn't always work out that way. So, any questions about any of that?
Did you guys have a reaction to the University of California Elsevier?
Oh, you bet. You bet we had a reaction to that. We're like, woohoo! We're so happy to see a major player take a stand, because that's what it's going to take. Little guys can say whatever we want, but it's not going to make a dent in them. So Europe is, way ahead of us on this for a while. I believe France has been like completely, their researchers are completely cut off from, what was it? It might be Elsevier, but yeah, it's good to see. Good to see. Oh, okay. I don't know what that is. You guys see that? Very annoying. Yeah, pills. I don't know. I get these annoying things. Okay. So going on. Next thing I wanted to mention was OER. So the Open Educational Resources is something we're very, very excited about. This has been happening kind of like over the past year or so. We've been working on this, and caught the attention of the Board of Regents with this, because they're very interested, and this is one of their top 3 priorities, actually, is OER and saving money for students. So we do have a contract with OTN to bring some training into state. We've already had one on February 1st here, and it's been open statewide to really, any of the higher education schools. And in fact, they did have somebody come in from OPI, Linda Ruman Peterson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she did make a point to stop, and she couldn't even attend the whole thing, but she did come up. So she seemed very interested, and like I said, we haven't really pursued that yet as far as K-12 goes. But again, I think we'd be open. We do have funding from OT and the Board of Regents for faculty incentive program. Maybe I should back up. Is everyone familiar with Open Educational Resources? Or should I explain that?
See heads shaking yes in the room. I'm not sure about
that. Okay. Yeah, you never know. That's a hit and miss. Sometimes people are like, oh yeah, they know it, and then sometimes they really don't. But it's definitely a tsunami across the country as far as higher ed is concerned, and I'm pretty sure it's here to stay. So in fact, we have just hired a OER coordinator who's coming to us from Oregon. I think I said that right. I'm always saying Oregon, and everyone's giving me a hard time about it. From Oregon, and her name is Christina Trundle. She will be starting next Wednesday. So it's going to be an amazing thing to have her here. There's so much work to do. And in fact, we had a discussion yesterday with some folks from OCHI about this process that they're doing with the CCN, Common Course Numbering System, that they're going to be taking that on in a much more serious manner. And ultimately, I would hope that we're going to be able to map those, like especially the undergrad common courses to OER, so that you can really get some bang for your buck, and you'll have many students that will be able to take advantage of not having to pay for a textbook. But that mapping is a little ways off yet, because they have to get all of those outcomes standardized and everything numbered accurately and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, and I know I've talked to Anne, and I always get her just Eubanks, yes, somewhat about this, so she's aware that we're doing this, and you know, I guess when we have the right context from K-12, we can certainly look at coordinating if that's appropriate. Moving on to next thing, Alma, Ex Libris Library Services Platform. So it's our cloud-based technological backbone that's allowing all the library operations and much more efficient workflow, easier exchange of materials, and hopefully an optimized, kind of seamless experience for the users. The discovery layer is called Primo, and we have, I believe it's 16 or 17 of our members are now on that system. Most recently, Flathead Valley came on board. And I will admit there is a big learning curve to it, because there are so many bells and whistles. It's a very powerful thing, but that means it's a little more challenging than to come up to speed with it. But I think you can talk to most folks, and they're like, yeah, it's pretty good once we get over that initial hump of trying to learn what they're talking about, because a lot of the documentation is online and things change, and it's never an easy process migrating a new platform, of course. So any questions about any of that? Okay. Other thing that we offer is professional development. We've got a committee for that, as you probably saw. These are some of the webinars that we provided so far. We haven't really been doing face-to-face stuff, because it just hasn't been too practical, but maybe in the future. There's a lot of room for development here, and certainly been talking with Joe about stuff, and we've looked for opportunities to work together where and when we can. And I think there's room for collaboration all the way around on that with public libraries and K-12 if it was applicable. Yeah. So have any of you attended any of the webinars?
No.
Nope.
One, but not any of these, I don't think.
You probably can't read the titles on them anyway. Yeah, we've got one coming up, which is prioritizing digitization for your library. That's coming up in, what, a month or something, or a couple of weeks, I think. Yeah, so that is, I guess, all I'm going to say about that. And looking at future and the priorities for trails, well, certainly it's just continuing to build up the shared e-resources that we've already started, and getting more into the usage stats, et cetera, because that's, as you all well know, I mean, that's when you can really tell what's important, what's not, and give us a little more leverage with the vendors. The OER is going to be, we think, a pretty huge deal. It's when I'm talking to people from OCHI or wherever, and they're all very excited about it. They feel like it's one of the biggest things they're probably going to do in their career, because that's how strongly people believe in what this can do for students when they're looking at, you know, buying a textbook or two, or being able to have lunch for a couple of weeks. That's a big deal. So we will have a survey coming out actually in a couple of weeks after spring break that's going to be statewide, so that we can get a better idea of the landscape out there as far as what faculty knows and does, and also the students. Supporting members' institutional objectives, we think it goes without saying, but that's kind of a big deal too in academia now, is you have to definitely be supporting that strategic mission of your institution, prove your relevancy. Digital preservation and institutional repository. Institutional repository is just something that, you know, we're talking about. It's not anything that's concrete in any way, and Kenny probably actually knows more about that, and probably folks at the state library as well. As far as, yeah, the Big Sky Country Digital Network actually is somebody, there's somebody on the line there that could speak to that. I think
Jennifer had to leave.
Oh, she did? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. All right, yeah, in case you know more about that too. And lastly would be, of course, always seeking funding. At this point, the members are contributing more than they were, but the brunt is still on MSU. And we are now getting some funding from OCHI, but they're supporting the OER coordinator in total. But as far as trails goes, I mean, they're contributing some, but not enough for us to independently survive, I would say. But as always, can't reiterate enough, I guess, you know, we're looking to find new ways of creating those paths between K-12 to higher ed and to career. There was a paper I read recently called Shift Happens to Future of Assessments in the Learning to Employment Landscape. But it really does do a great description of describing what is going on, at least as far as higher education and certification and careers. And it's a little, I thought it was a little frightening for higher education, to be honest, but in other ways it's a positive thing. But there's going to be a myriad of ways for people to be learning and have their knowledge and abilities assessed or certified, and that will be outside of traditional higher education. You've got companies, you've got third parties, you've got all kinds of groups coming in doing this now, and I think higher education needs to really figure out a way to accommodate this, including the huge movement of working learners and learning workers, which we know statistically outnumber traditional students by quite a bit. And if we don't find a better way to make, I think, a stronger, more seamless transition between K-12 and post-secondary and a career and then lifelong learning, that would be a missed opportunity. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking for a way to tighten and smooth the trail, and that is a pun intended, between K-12 and higher ed. So the tagline that we've got, I don't have it up, is helping academic libraries to help Montana, but I think that could be extended to helping libraries to help Montana along with the Montana State Library and everyone else. So I guess that's about it, and I'm wondering if this is going to, okay, I have one more slide. Oh, yeah, that was supposed to be up while I was talking about that, but there you go. Different pathways, different directions. And then I've got this.
All right. Thank you, Pamela.
Yes.
Anyone have any other questions, Pamela? Well, thank you. That was helpful.
Thank you.
An overview. All right. I will take back the screen, Pamela. So you have covered a lot today, NAC members, but I have one more kind of deep thinking exercise for you right at the end of a long afternoon, right? You have been troopers. This next piece is kind of what sort of touched on briefly when we were talking about funding and the fact that lifelong learning, by its very nature being from birth to end of life and across all types of libraries, could probably be a job for 10 people, and we have one person. And so we would really like to, I guess, know where to prioritize our efforts, since we could go in a million different directions. This began because a group came together to come up with some recommendations for library development, and for all of us in library development, not just Amelia, for our entire division and where we should focus our energies. And Jenny and I have been kind of going through each one and looking at the topic and trying to maintain the spirit of the recommendation, but actually put it in outcome statements that we can measure, that have an audience and a clear benefit and so forth. And when we got to lifelong learning, we realized, and I'll go ahead and pull this up here so you can kind of see, we felt like it was kind of, could go in a million different directions. And we didn't feel like this was one we could summarize and sort of say, okay, this is what this group meant, and this is what it would look like when we try to implement it. And so that's why I came back to the NAC, because most of the members, I believe, of the Library Development Study Task Force, or not maybe most, but a lot of them were Network Advisory Council members. And so I was hoping that you could give Amelia and I some guidance. And so I asked Amelia, what would you like to know? And so some of the questions on that memo are from Amelia, of things she would like to know from you about the lifelong learning program at the State Library, and where she's taken it so far, and where she needs to take it into the future. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of a background on this topic. So I'll go ahead and bring up the memo and make it a little bigger so that you can see it really quickly. So these are sort of the questions we had for you. Really quickly on the what age group should we serve, I almost got the sense when you were telling me the funding priorities that the early childhood was still a priority, but older adults was a priority. Are there any other age groups?
I was thinking birth to old age.
But if you had to pick.
Oh, I think I'm funny.
Oh, you are funny.
Like, I know, you think about what the demographic makeup of the state, and we have a growing aging population. I think it would be helpful to know of even that older demographic, which of them have particular needs that aren't being met or could be met through library services. It's hard to think about age groups because it's exactly what you said, it's birth to a degree. Well, and that's kind of the definition of life.
And we do programming aimed at specific ages with children, but I think our other programming tends to be focused on people who want to learn X or people who want to learn Y, whether you're 42 and you want to learn about gardening, or you're 65 and you want to learn about gardening. We're kind of but it's interesting to think about age priority, but we don't normally.
So should we actually be, should Amelia be focusing on programming that is like that, that's subject topic based versus age based?
And to give you a little bit of context on what's out there, Tracy had mentioned we'd gone to the Lifelong Learning Symposium, which was in Bozeman, and that was pretty high level. They did talk about some specific programs that were going on, but there are other organizations in the state that are focusing on older adults. But something else that has come up is Medicare and Medicaid. I think a lot of people have lots of questions, and there's like no orientation on enrolling in that or anything like that. So definitely health stuff as well is where that has also come up. And then I forget the name of that organization that reached out to us, but there's a group that is focusing on like creative aging. I think that's what they're called, Center for Creative Aging. And so they are really focused on providing arts-related programming for older adults. And it's kind of similar to the, what did they call those? It was the learning. Huh?
Elder hostel or?
No, the one that was mentioned at the Lifelong Learning Symposium from Arizona State University.
Oh, yeah.
That has a specific, but they're basically lifelong learning institutes. Is that what they're called?
It's not quite it, but close.
Something like that. And it is that program is a little broader. Like it's gauged towards anyone who wants to learn, but in some cases it's actually focused on like older adults. So that's some of the stuff that's out there with the older demographic. So if anything like that strikes, sounds really good, feel free to let me know, and I can follow up.
Yeah, I like the idea of thinking about the subject first, because the example that I thought of was, a lot of people are changing careers and they're seeking learning opportunities so that they can either make decisions about what they want to be when they grow up next. And that could be anywhere from somebody who's 25 to somebody who's 75 or 95 for that matter. So I think that's another thing that we hear about a lot with needing to build skill sets for the jobs of tomorrow, and that is the idea of career change and programming that helps people make those decisions and know what options are available to them for technical training or degree programs or whatever, what would be that would help them make those career changes.
So I have a quick thought as well. So talking about the age priority, so early childhood and older adults, older demographics, to me, is kind of like another way of saying, at least in one way, that you're not going to focus on serving like childhood, like children through college-educated people, which, again, is just to me saying that you're really interested in the people who are not currently or actively involved in some kind of educational program or institution or something like that. So, like this lifelong learning idea, it's kind of like you're not worried about those people who are already enrolled in college or in public school or preschool. You're worried about the people outside of the traditional educational structures, and kind of having to serve them and how to serve them. Anyway, that was just kind of the thought. Something possibly to think about.
No, I think that's a good question, Cody. Is that what we really want? Or do we need to rethink that and serve those people as well?
I think, well, Colleen mentioned this, but I think part of the reason that we focused on solutions is just pure statistics that are coming out, and they're not going to decrease anytime, so that was my recollection.
And I think in some ways, during the childhood, the teens, it's easier for a librarian to come up with ideas on their own. Whereas when you're dealing with the early childhood and the aging, those topics can be a little touchier, and it's a little harder for the librarians to come up with really good programming. I mean, we can throw stuff at them, but it doesn't really help a lot.
That makes me think, too, that maybe a function of the lifelong learning coordinator could be to be the curator of who are the people and the partners that our libraries can take advantage of if they want to or need to do programming on a particular topic. We've talked, there's one thing about designing and developing and then delivering content, but I think when you have one person and limited resources, how you can coordinate and use the skills that librarians and the tools that librarians have. We've kind of playfully talked about in the past in different conversations how cool it would be to add people and organizations to the shared catalog or to our shared collection. And that's kind of the idea, is how do you coordinate and bring people together who can help. Like my husband sent me a video about having the discussion with aging parents about do they have a will or not, and have they made their final directives, and it's not going to be comfortable for a family member, and I don't necessarily think it's easier for your public librarian.
From the MSU library, her extension office, she came to our library and did a great talk, and you get a little book too. You can leave that out for everybody, but so I mean, I don't think it would all end up being on your shoulders. I mean, we can, as librarians and stewards of resources, share our contacts with you, and maybe you can make a book like you, kind of like you did the other one. Remember, you made
The health literacy.
Yeah, the health literacy book. Maybe make a book that kind of says, okay, if you're looking for adult aging services, maybe you want to contact this person. And we did Alzheimer's training because Jody from Drummond said, your people are old too, and we work here. And I'm like, okay, I'll try, and it worked. So sometimes maybe just sending out an email and saying, you know what, give me ideas on for a demographic. Maybe that would make your life easier. Maybe it would make it way more complicated too. I don't know. But I really do, because I shared your health toolkit with our health department and with our health, I can't remember the technical term, but they just started this healthy living group in Boulder, and I shared it with them. And so they are all going through it.
I was actually kind of curious about that, because I actually thought that the toolkit was useful for me putting that together, because I got a sense of what was in the state, but I wasn't actually very sure if it was useful for the libraries.
Well, it was for me because we were doing the Alzheimer's awareness.
Cool.
And so if it's a download on the website, you should have analytics on the number of times it's been accessed.
Oh, wow, that's never even occurred to me.
Sorry, I feel like I'm giving you way more work.
Yeah, it's a PDF. But I'm also not sure how many people are aware of
the website too. I've been sending it out, but I don't know.
There's a lot. All right. We didn't really tackle Cody's question about the the ages in between. So we might come back to that, but I'll give you some thinking time. I'm actually going to jump down really quickly to the fourth question before I talk about challenges and opportunities and how can we help support libraries when it comes to lifelong learning. What isn't working? And Amelia asked this. She said, Tracy, I want to know the answer to this, and my feelings aren't going to be hurt. So she means it, I think. She wanted to know what isn't working in our current lifelong learning opportunities. And I will just, for your sake, Amelia, read through some of these here. Cody was just saying he had to leave. And Sonia said, we might want to get a resource list developed as to who to contact for which subject, i.e. MSU Extension, cancer survivors, etc. Anything that isn't working or that, if you are uncomfortable using that terminology, that could be improved?
You can also be as frank as you want. I think this is mostly on me, but I don't think that even being on the NAC and whatever, I don't think I know like everything that you guys are doing. Like if there was a quiz and I had to say, what all is Amelia doing and what are the lifelong learning things? And I think I wonder if I even know what they all are because I don't know how to answer this question. Would be helpful for me to run through what I can think of. Sometimes I don't even know.
Yeah, well, and so that's the question back is that for the things that you are doing, what are the metrics that you have to show satisfaction or numbers, usage numbers and that sort of thing. I think that more than anything can help, answer that question as report out and get feedback. Mm-hmm. So if it's the health booklet that you're talking about, what metrics do you have that can tell you, was my time and effort for creating this? It's nice to have those hard metrics, but also then reaching out and getting those anecdotal reports of how useful and helpful it was. It's hard to answer that question if we don't ask the question from an evaluation standpoint to the participants or users.
I will say that I think most of my data as far as like how is this program tends to be pretty anecdotal. Right now I measure it based on like the amount of responses I get back and whether people are asking questions to sort of indicate interest. And so with some of the programs, with some of the stuff there's not really, it's not really something that people would ask questions about. It's like, oh, here's this link or here's this thing, like I want to let you know, and I think a lot of people do read it and a lot of people are aware of it. Another reason why I'm interested in Project Outcome is I think it will help gauge that a little bit better and see how many people are actually participating. So with the giant map of Montana, for example, we're using Project Outcome with that. And I don't think everyone is doing it, but we are getting some numbers back. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, there is a group of people using it in every location that it's been in. And then sometimes I just like call people and ask them, like, what do you think? Does it sound like a good idea? And I've gotten more comfortable with doing that, and I think that's actually been the quickest and most direct way for me to get feedback. When I first started, I really didn't like talking on the phone, but it's better now. So that's usually how I do it. I kind of just ask people now, and I think also now people are more aware that I'm here. And so I'm now starting to get people emailing me every now and then instead of me casting out into the void.
One thought that comes to mind as far as that middle age group that we're talking about is just the fact that we have access to parents and grandparents that you might serve with that older generation. So just in pure communication, you know, it might be really interesting to provide some of that information. I mean, I think a lot of our parents would love to have that healthy book right for themselves and for their families. So we could just be sort of one more avenue to get that information to them. So that's something to think about.
My one concern with reaching out to school librarians, and I sort of learned this through that week when I sent, we had made little packages and we sent it out on Wired, and I was like, they're free, so first come, first serve, any library that wants to participate in that week. And in my head I was like, oh, Wired only goes to public librarians. That's not the case. And so a lot of people from school libraries had also responded, and also from schools, which was fine, and I was more than happy to send things out to them. But like, thank God that that week had a very finite number of packages, because then I could say, oh, sorry, this is the cutoff, we just don't have any more. But like, my one concern is like reaching out to school librarians and then being like, oh, sorry, I've reached out and I can't actually support in any meaningful way. Like, I don't want it to come off as me using them, being like, you can go and, you know, promote this, but I can't actually provide anything in return.
Yeah, I mean, you fall into kind of a perennial problem in that Wired is not the state library, Wired is MLA. And when you have opt-in lists, when you don't have a tool yourself where you can manage contact lists and curate who you want to send to and be more targeted in what gets sent and who, it's going to be a scattershot approach and you're going to get that variety of responses.
So now I usually only send out things that I'm like, yeah, anyone can do this on Wired. And for a lot of the programs that I'm doing now, I actually tend to email people individually. Because there's not that many public libraries in Montana. Like, I can usually email them all in the morning. So I reach out that way. But yeah, that's just my one concern with, because I would love to work with them because there is so much that I think I'm doing that they would appreciate, and that I could probably learn from them. But I'm also like, that's a very large group of people, and I just don't think I could properly support.
Well, maybe it's just a matter of using school libraries as a way to advertise what's available. You know, not necessarily content or some of that, those kits or things like that, but just information that they could access. It seems like, you know, you might broaden your audience, which I understand means that you're potentially biting off more than you can chew. So you might have to pick and choose a little bit.
Okay.
You know, what you're sharing.
Maybe if it's okay with me, maybe I'll run like an email draft or like some information about you and see. Sure. Because it's just, my main thing is like, I don't want it to feel like I'm just hi, bye, and not doing much else. So I would email you.
Okay. Any other recommendations for improving the program overall? Oh. Dana says school librarians have thick skins, Amelia, so if it's labeled community libraries only, no one will vlog you.
Cool. Thanks, Dana.
So the next question I had, I think, is more about getting us to focus, and you actually answered what challenges, I think, in your communities, at least the public libraries did. I would actually be interested in hearing from our specials in schools. From the publics, I mean, the challenges I heard that your community members are facing are homelessness, mental health issues and challenges, suicide prevention, but what are some of the other challenges your community members are facing? And please think broader for those of you who aren't necessarily in public libraries. You have community members too, and what challenges are they facing?
Well, I realize that rather than speaking generally for special libraries, I'm always just kind of focused on the law library, but all of the things that you just listed compounded or also with legal issues. And so I think that the people that are presenting in public libraries, maybe they're seeking information on one thing, but they're likely to have legal issues in the background as well.
Yes, actually. A lot of your issues, I'm amazed at how they do correlate to public libraries.
I think all of those are very important in schools. And I think some of the other things that are hot topics right now are drugs, as always, and specifically vaping, and just education around that. And then kind of back to what we talked about earlier with the civil discourse, just how to sift through information and be an educated consumer of information, and knowing how to make those judgments. So that's something I think that schools are trying to attack, and it's a big topic, and there isn't really a natural place for it in many of our schools, and so trying to fit it in places where it works. And of course that comes back to the parent community and community as a whole, so those are big issues.
Yeah. So just also to mirror those or add to, drug issues, a lot of the people that we're dealing with, or that we work with, especially if it's relating to parenting issues, is by far meth. If you have the chance to read, or you can watch it, Chief Justice McGrath's State of the Judiciary. There's some really compelling statistics on abuse and neglect cases and how that's like doubled in the, how the past 5 years, and that the percentages of, substance abuse is involved in almost all of those cases by far is meth, alcohol, and then a handful of other things. But it's a huge issue. And I don't think, and I'm not saying that people who are coming in high or anything, but I think that's just something that, makes all of those problems even more difficult.
No, I think we've heard that from school librarians and public librarians, that they're seeing kids that they can tell are being neglected. So, Dana said she'll pose this to the larger group of school librarians, but she did want to share that our students are spending hours on Chromebooks, and I worry about digital literacy skills. Anyone else online? I lost some of the NAC members. But it looks like we still have Elizabeth and Sonia and Stacy. Are there any challenges that, and Dana, you're welcome to weigh in too, are there any other challenges you'd like me to add to the list that you feel like your community members are facing or the people you serve are facing?
I'm trying to figure out how to put this into words. I feel like there's too much information. Like, people don't understand that they need us. Like, that there's so much information at their fingertips, but they're not really getting to the core of it. Like, I was at a community meeting and people were talking about stuff, and I kept thinking, I can find the data on that. I can find the data on that. And nobody was really thinking about that at all, because they just thought it wasn't top of their mind that, oh, there's probably some best practices out there. We're not the first people to address this problem. Let's, we could actually find the statistics of how we compare to another city. And I didn't want to come across as wellness know-it-all. But I kind of wanted to. I wanted to be like, you know, if you all would have asked me ahead of time, I could have created a resource report for you. And I think that those points of need are places where people don't think, oh, we should ask a librarian, because they can just Google. But that is really a piece. People are just, you know, top 2 hits on Google, that's the information they're going with, and I don't know that it serves us well when our business leaders and our administrators are not to diss on them, but you know, we're not reliving this very information-rich environment that nobody's using.
And then we know how to swim in.
Right.
And maybe do some fancy dives, too.
This is Pamela. I just have to, I got to speak to that. You know, you can't, blame cannot be put on, obviously, on the patron or the user for that, for not knowing to come to us. That's all on us. That's all our inability to market ourselves well, to get ourselves out there. It's kind of the same thing in the scientific world. You hear it from scientists complaining about, well, people should know this, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. But they are finding now that they've got to go to them, including like their tech writers and everything else. You've got to make it accessible. And we say it over and over again that we've got to market, that you've got to do this, but we still kind of, it falls in the cracks. And you're right, this is like a prime opportunity now for libraries to be asserting themselves in a myriad of ways. The ridiculous amount of information that's out there and you need guidance. The civil discourse certainly issues our role as a neutral party. I mean, there's just so many ways that we could be taking advantage of the situation.
Thanks, Pamela.
I'm adding all the really depressing ones, but not that people necessarily come and ask for information about the topic, but domestic violence we know is so pervasive in our communities. I mean, we have fatalities and murder-suicides on it. How often? Just in Helena, and it's at all levels of the community. It's not just, you know, and it's almost become normalized, which, I mean, is really scary. So I don't know how that really fits in, but maybe just an awareness that some of the, you know, we know people that we are helping have a whole background of things going on that maybe there's more of that than we know of, or, you know.
And just to let Sonia and Elizabeth know, I did add, Sonia had said shrinking populations was a challenge she sees in her community. Elizabeth said adjusting to or learning new technologies. So Dana says, my nearby library friends and I are noticing that once classrooms have Chromebooks, teachers adopt the lessons school librarians once taught. So for school librarians, maybe finding your way in this new world. Much like public librarians, I think, too.
I guess one other question that I have is when going out and like contacting people about these topics, one question that I always have is like I'm not actually the one out in libraries, and so it's hard for me to, because always I'm like, oh, this is a topic that librarians are interested in, and then the question is always like, well, what would they like to do? And I'm always like, everything, want to do everything. But I'm also aware that there's very real limitations in terms of funding, time, in terms of what you guys are already doing. And so I'm still sort of figuring out like how to best make those contacts without like saying immediately, like, yes, all these libraries will get in contact with you, because I can't promise that people will be able to act on that information. And so I'm wondering if it's best for me to just to give you all those contacts and be like, this person is open talking, or is it easier for you to either like work with people and put a kind of program idea together and that, or and I'm still sort of figuring out how to best forge those partnerships myself. But yeah, I mean, it's nice. Every time I send something out, people are like, cool, this is great. But it actually would be more helpful if you were like, it would be more great if you send this, or this, like, you know, would be better for what I'm looking to do. So.
I think the other observation I would share that I have noticed is we have more agencies, non-library, state agencies, nonprofits, private industry contacting us, wanting to partner with libraries than any of us ever have the capacity to work with, which is great news. I said that people are recognizing us as a resource and a way to reach people. But I think part of that I would add, which is really helpful, is knowing what the priorities are, and I know they're not the same, knowing what the main priorities are, that we should say, at least maybe not yes, but we are interested in exploring a partnership with you. Because, like, what I heard was these top ones, for instance, they're very challenging issues, but I heard and saw nodding heads for all of them. And so to me that means that if, you know, the Department of Public Health and Human Services reaches out to Amelia and says, we want to work with libraries on addressing homelessness, that I could probably feel confident about saying to Amelia, yep, you please follow that through. And that's part of what's behind this conversation. Is it's very helpful for us to know what things cross all types of libraries, cross all ages and communities and geography, so that when these people approach us, we can say yes or no, or we'll think about it. That's the other thing I think would be really helpful. So I want to actually move us out of the negative, believe it or not, and more into the positive, because I think that's something our world needs a little bit more of, is joy. So I would like to know what positive opportunities or joys you think we could bring to community members through our libraries, through all types and sizes. It's amazing how hard it is for us to answer this question, isn't it?
I like to think that we bring joy to our community by being involved. Our library is, because there's nothing involved, it's easier for me than some of the other bigger towns, that we're the center of the community. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen at the library. So for me, it's a matter of saying, okay, I know I'm not program on the table, you know, but watching the people in the community take over, like the Tai Chi. We started Tai Chi at the library 3 years ago, and we had 8 people in Boulder, Montana who come to Tai Chi 3 times a week, and I don't even happen to be there. How cool is that? You know, I mean, we borrowed ukuleles for the public library because they don't use them anymore, and they keep meeting and meeting and meeting, waiting for them to say that they're ready. I had to call Steph and let her know that they're still using it. So I think we do bring joy. I just think people aren't measuring it in the same way. I don't care how many people come to my library. Unfortunately, they keep coming. But I would rather see a smile when they leave, or see them walking out with somebody they didn't know prior to walking in, and visiting with one another. And that's the part of connecting the community with other community members. And I think libraries, whether you're small or big, I think we can all be happy about doing that.
I think giving patrons, you know, assistance or a response that we've actually put thought into. A lot of the people that end up in any kind of library, I think, have been shuffled for a few agencies first, and then somebody's going to go to the library, and then that's the first time that after visiting so many places that someone actually, let me think about that, or you know, offers some ideas or offers something for them to work with. So I think that's unique for us.
So I'm adding yours, Sonia. She said, for the elderly, we are a wonderful friendship.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really great point about the creating thoughtful services and interactions. We had a Tench come and do a mindful and heartful session, and I thought about when you said that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things she talks about as a real touch point is interacting with the patron is a moment to be very, very present for that person and how that in and of itself makes their lives better. It's really moving.
I think, too, even as challenging as some of those topics might be, there's ways to address them that if it doesn't bring joy or can happen through joyful activities, relieves stress, creates improved dialogues.
What other opportunities are out there?
We hear from people all the time that, you know, I love the library. I'm so grateful for my library card. And just the fact that they can come in and get large print books, or that they can check out audiobooks, or that, you know, their kid gets to sit in color. I mean, the fact that we really do improve quality of life for people, like for informational and recreational. I think our recreational piece gets overlooked a lot, but it is, we want to live in communities that have high quality of life.
Okay, so Pamela has shared the sidewalk talk. I think I've heard about this. It's where strangers can just go up and talk to people about their problems. Is that right, Pamela?
Kind of. I think it's a little more structured than that now. I'm not real familiar with it, but it looks like they actually have, you know, maybe psychologists or social workers or folks that are trained in this, and they have to be out in a public space. But I actually contacted somebody at the organization and mentioned, what about collaborating with public libraries, and they said, yeah, that would be a great idea, but it's up to each individual library to contact them to set it up. But they've like grown exponentially. They're in, I forget, like 12 countries, and they're everywhere now. 40 cities, 12 countries, but and it's all volunteer based. But it seems like, since this is such a major problem, loneliness, that is, for everyone, and not just, I mean, it seems like it's not just the elderly that you would expect. Apparently, it's also teenagers, college age. That's a big reason. Some of the students, they feel incredibly isolated. I just think, again, libraries are in a good position to offer something like this if you have somebody that people can come in and just talk to.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think Sonia and Stacy both talked about how they help students by proctoring tests. So I did add supporting educational needs, because that is an opportunity we have working with people. So my next question for you is, how can MSL sort of support these lifelong learning efforts? How can we help these different challenges? You threw out some ideas, you know, like the connecting with resources, you know, like the health literacy toolkit. What else?
The programs in a box, like the NASA, something that You can take out of the box, spend an hour planning, and we had a program. It clears up so much of the time and you don't feel so overwhelmed.
Okay. Programming in a box. Other ways we can help?
Well, I love all the support you provide for summer reading and the story time and the ready to read. I mean, I don't want you to forget that those are really wonderful and super helpful.
The other thing I think about with the early literacy in particular is that that was a program that grew over a long period of time. And definitely with some trial and error. And we learned a lot about the training that librarians need in order to effectively implement those kinds of programs. And I think with some of these, you know, there might be some low-hanging fruit or some just more readily accessible ideas, and some of these, we might try something and it won't work, but we learned something and we might turn it around and figure out a way to invest in a different way and eventually maybe even invest more deeply. So I think some of it will require some evaluation of how much do we invest up front and how much do we think about investing long term.
So just make sure that, okay, Suzanne shared. There was a really interesting discussion on Twitter recently where people were talking about how great it would be if libraries were open at night as places where people could meet and interact without having to go to a bar or pay money for a show. Not really lifelong learning, but lifelong learning with a focus on interaction could help with the loneliness or lack of social outlets. Mm-hmm. Any other, here's an NPR report from 2013 about supporting conversations. Okay, thank you, Dana. All right. Okay. Any other thoughts on how we can support lifelong learning in libraries and or address these challenges? Take advantage of opportunities.
Continue to answer your phone.
Sometimes we just need to be talked off the edge.
Well, we're not to make this all about fairness, by the way, but we're looking to start a Storytime Reach Out program where we actually have volunteers going out into the community to provide Storytime, like at Head Start and our Rescue Mission and some other places. And we would love for some help, some support with training those volunteers in the Ready to Read model.
So something that I'm working with Pam Carlton on is she and I have both gotten the facilitator training for Supercharged Storytime. So we're starting a Supercharged Storytime learning cohort with the eventual goal that the people who are in the learning cohort will take that information and then become trainers in their own communities. So we're starting with a pretty small group in the beginning, but it's not just limited to staff members, like volunteers. Anyone who does Storytime stuff is welcome to participate. So we'll be sending out information about that. But you also feel free to have anyone contact me, and I will talk their ear off.
Because our biggest, when people call and want to volunteer, they all want to read to kids, but so we want to have a way to do that, but that it actually meets our goals.
Right.
And so we're trying to do some combination of utilizing that volunteer group, but we really want it to be based, on best practices.
Yep. Background checks.
Background checks, yes, we need background checks. We need background checks. Yeah, so we're trying to get a grant for it, but that's something I'm kind of excited about.
That came up in the Lifelong Learning Symposium and a couple other places is that we have some young retirees who have really great skill sets and want to volunteer in a meaningful way. And so that's a great example. If you come to all the obvious stuff. So
well, it's a great. Let's talk in a year. We take risks, right? We take risks.
Yes.
And if it flops, it flops. But
yeah.
You'll never succeed if you don't try.
That's true. You can't make any baskets if you don't shoot.
It's true. Any other final comments on any of these questions? Any other final things you want to share with Amelia? Or Amelia, do you have any other questions for the group? Things you would like to know?
No, other than any feedback and any suggestions and ideas are always welcome. In fact, actually, that helps me focus things a little bit more. Because I've been here long enough where I've gotten a feel for my workflow, and if I have something that's just kind of a general, broad topic thing, it's sort of there, but then I kind of let it. I don't actually work on it until someone's like, hey, I would like that thing in this context. And then I'm like, okay, now I have something concrete to work on. This actually came up with the civil conversations thing where for many, many weeks, Tracy and I would meet, and every now and then she'd be like, civil conversations, and I'd write it down in my notebook. And it's in my notebook 8 times. But it wasn't until recently until I was like, oh, I guess I should do this and work on this. And so now with the context of homelessness, that will actually give me something to spring off of, which is great. So yeah, feel free to suggest things, to let me know what's working, what's not, and what you're interested in, because that will honestly help me pare down what to focus on.
So you like actionable items, not giant.
Excellent.
Sonia says Humanities Montana has a wonderful program for hosting civil conversations. You should reach out to them.
Yeah, we're looking.
All right, so we're down to the last 2 standard items that are always on the NAC agenda. Does anyone have any other business or announcements that you want to share with the group? Oh, here's even better, Sonia. They provide money to host it.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well then, they just got bumped hard.
And then, is there any public comment on any matter not contained on this agenda? Okay. Well, with that, thank you. This is a great discussion. I got a lot of good stuff out of this. And hopefully Karen and Amelia did too, for their particular topics. And I just wanted to say, if there's anything you want to chat about as a group, you are welcome to add to the agenda. I mean, I kind of make notes of what people have mentioned, and that's how the agendas get built, and then I obviously have things I need from you. But if there's something you're really interested in discussing as a group, please feel free to let me know and we'll add it to the agenda. And so with that, we're scheduled to meet again in May. I do need to adjust that meeting date to May, I think it's May 8th, is that right? Yes, because the shared catalog meeting, it could only find time May 9th and 10th. So I'll be getting in touch with you. The plan at this point is for that to just be an offline meeting, although we had such little bit lower face-to-face attendance at this meeting, so we actually probably could do another face-to-face one. We still have money in the budget left for that. So. All right, and thank you to those of you online. I know how challenging it is to sit through an entire meeting. So with that, we are adjourned.
Yeah, I mean, so the course is actually online now.